Gary has 34 years in the automotive service industry. He's been blessed to have done training, business consulting, and worked for hundreds of automotive shops and dealerships, 46 of the 50 states, and the Caribbean, and has trained over 10,000 professionals over the last 17 years. He does a little bit of technician training, a little bit of shop training, a little bit of everything anymore, just like a lot of us have to do, and especially most of the shop owners are all technicians. Everybody has worked up and moved to the next level. So Jerry has that perspective on the industry, coaches business on technical, customer satisfaction, and shop process practices. He's helped many shops and dealerships to grow their business and improve their performance throughout his career. He currently works as a national instructor with AutoMasterTraining, Launch Diagnostic Equipment, ASA, the Shell Corporation, and now will be a WTI trainer with our organization as he helps us as we move to our next training level as well. So we're excited to have Gary at the Expo today and to share his thoughts with us on how to succeed with the struggle of the industry.
Thank you.
Gary, thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Wow, that's loud. Good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing? You guys love ATE or what? ATE is probably by far my favorite event that I do every year. I love you guys. I love being here. And I thank you very much for the honor of speaking to you guys in such a forum today. I want to thank WorldPAC very much for sponsoring this, and also for honoring me with an invite to join their training team, which prior to me being invited to do that, I've always looked at them as one of the best training teams in the country, so I'm really honored to be a part of that. Today I have a speech that may be partly motivational, maybe partly educational, and maybe a little bit of a reality slap. As many of you guys know, I do a technical support business. I support over 100 plus shops in 18 states on the technical end. And the subject of my subject matter today is about that business and what I'm seeing in some of the trending going on. But before I go there, I want to introduce me, the traveling technician. This speech is called Musings of a Recent Road Rat. That's me. In the last 24 months, we've had a really unique experience. We, meaning my business partner, my lovely wife, Melinda. We've done 4 training road trips around the United States. In that time, we've done 53 cities in 2015. We've done 48 cities in 2016. We've done hundreds of shops and technicians trained. Each trip of our legs added 12,000 road miles. 5 national and regional trade show events, 23 hands-on lab scope events, and many theory-based classes along the way. Now on the personal side, you can see we've got 7 national battlefields in the mix of this. The beautiful thing about doing training on the road is you can schedule stuff city to city to city and have a little bit of fun in between. So we did 7 national battlefields in this time. I'm a student of history and I love history. And this was just about as much fun as doing the training trips. I saw 11 of 13 presidential museums, 8 historical and automotive museums, 27 national parks in 24 months. And we did 42 states in those 24 months. Over 40,000 miles of beautiful American roadway. And let me tell you this, one heck of a sore butt. When you drive a car 40,000 miles in 24 months running around the United States, I assure you, that's some ground pounding. So I wanted to share with you the map that we've been tracking these trips on. If you take a look at that, we've covered a lot of the roads in the United States of America. And the reason that I'm sharing this with you is because along those roads, we've done hundreds of training stops. And the reason that that's important for this discussion is within those hundreds of training spots, we've done them in all markets. The backwoods of the mountains, the big cities, the smaller municipalities, the medium-sized cities. My point in sharing this with you is our business is the business. And everybody thinks, well, what works in Miami doesn't work in Seattle. That is not correct. The only difference between the two is climate and road conditions. But fixing these cars is exactly the same thing no matter where you live. So along the road we saw a lot of history and a lot of the country. Guys, for those of you that haven't traveled much, I will tell you there's a few bucket list things that I'm going to share with you right now. One of them is to see the Lincoln Memorial at night. There is nothing more religious, other than religion, than seeing the Lincoln Memorial at midnight when there's not 1,000 people crawling through it. It brings the hair up on the back of your neck how powerful that is there, right? That's really neat. I want to share with you 3 pictures that I'm going to scroll through as I talk. This was at the Gettysburg battlefield. The reason I'm sharing this with you is if you look at these paintings, it looks like you could just reach in and jump into that scene. For those of you that have had a chance to go there, you may have seen this, but it was only recently put up about 2 years ago. This painting is an oil painting done in 1867, 2 years after the Civil War. It was done by a gentleman by himself. And the amazing thing about this painting is it hangs at the battlefield. But guys, this is an oil painting that is 320 feet in circumference and 40 feet tall off the ground. It's the most amazing historical piece I think I've ever laid my eyes on. And from a bucket list perspective, if you ever get a chance to go there and see that, you must look at it. I mean, look at the depth of these pictures. So, along the way, we encountered a lot of different road signs, and I thought that was pretty neat because when I left the Keys, we had crocodile crossing signs, and by the time we get up to the northwest, we've got bull moose and elk signs, and then we had armadillos and cats and longhorn sheep and everything along the way. So my wife said to me as I kept getting out of the car and taking these pictures, she said, "You really need a life." I mean, here's my husband on the side of the road taking pictures of signs of cattle crossings and so forth. But this was the 2016 Best Road Sign of the Year Award. Take a look at that. Right? So, some funny guy took and put a cowboy on top of that deer, and that was in Wyoming between Teton National Park and Yellowstone. But guys, the national parks, right? When you get to the national parks, you've got to get into a camper or rent a motorhome and take your children and grandchildren to these national parks. They are a true blessing of the birthright we have as an American. And Canadians, eh? But in 27 national parks, we saw some incredible sights, but the 2016 coolest National Park Sign Award in my book was Sequoia National Park. I just love that Indian. I was going to try and steal it, but there was a park ranger there. We saw stunning views and lots of wildlife. We saw the redwoods, we went to Crater Lake, we saw El Capitan and Yosemite down in the lower right corner, and then of course Arches National Park was spectacular. Yellowstone, however, was my favorite national park of all. That is a bucket list trip for anybody sitting in this room. You must see Yellowstone. It is the most spectacular place I've ever been on earth. Parts of it look like landscape, parts of it, like on the lower right, lower left there, look like moonscape. It's amazing, that park. So along the way we did some camping and we burned some meat. One of the most beautiful spots that I saw was Half Dome at Yosemite National Park. That was the second most stunning view. The most stunning view for us occurred in Glacier National Park. If you've ever been up there, it is absolutely beautiful. But being who I am in the business, my wife says I'm an ABS, always be selling. So as we were on vacation in Yellowstone National Park, I identified there was a garage there. So I grabbed my ATS brochure and my business card, said, "Hold on, honey, I'm going to go cold call this garage. They need some diagnostic equipment." And I went in there, had a great discussion, and we're going to be carrying on some business here pretty soon. But during this time, we did multiple, and I mean multiple training events. I was trying to figure it out to record it for the speech, and I couldn't even figure out how many there were. There were multiple, right? Really good people, good folks like everyone in this room sitting here trying to do the best they can for their customers in an age of very, very high quantum leaps in technology. Would you guys agree with that? Everybody's struggling right now with the technology, and I don't care if you're the best A-Tech in the world with 40 years in the business or whether you're just starting out learning electronics. These days are challenging for technicians, hence the subject matter of my speech. I get to work with the best of people, and I mean the best. Can anybody recognize whose shop that is? You bet. That's why I say I work with the best of people. What a great family. I also work with the funniest of people. Here's a guy that yells out at me as I'm doing a seminar in the shop, "Look, man, bucket seats." I said, let me get a picture of that. And then I ran into some people that are really seriously dedicated to their car lines. How would you like to have a Cadillac tattoo on your arm? Saw some really cool rides along the way. Being an automotive guy, that's awesome. And I saw some spectacular rides. This was in Glacier National Park, and believe it or not, that photo is not staged. I rolled up on those two National Park trucks sitting there, and I said, I got to get that picture. Those are white motor cars that have been restored by Ford Motor Company in the last 2 years. There's 30 of them in the park, and they're really cool looking, so I love that shot. And then we see some strange rides. This is from where I come from. Key West conch cruisers, we call them. Anything that's got shells and flowers glued to it in the keys is called a conch cruiser. Also worked on some beat rides, guys. You know what that's like. So as I've traveled throughout the United States, Canada, and the Caribbean over the last 17 years, it's been a major blessing in my life and in my professional career. But this experience has allowed me to acquire some very extremely unique and valuable information that I want to share with you today. You see, we've trained thousands of technicians, service department employees, service managers, shop owners, both in the dealer world and independents. And right now we actively provide ongoing live on-car technical support for guys when the chips are down. Some of my customers, my very good ones, are in this room. And because of these personal and career experiences, I've put a talk together today that's going to be a little of everything. We're going to talk about some struggles in the business, okay? Which might make a few people in the room twitch around in their seats a bit, but I'm over it. Now, in our technician support business, we try to identify some key trends in what's happening out there now in the diagnostic industry. I've got a small amount of data from my support business that I'd like to share with you in relation to this. The information that I bring you today, guys, and I say this with all sincerity, is with a heart of love for my industry, a heart of love for my fellow techs, and the shop owners and service advisors that take the punishment from the customers all day long. But this speech is also fully intended and meant to be a wake-up call for everyone sitting in this room. Here's the trends. In over 60% of the cases involving a technician stuck on a car for more than 2 days, we have identified that there were 3 or more new parts installed on the car prior to the call to our helpline. That is not a good trend. In over 75% of those cases, the technician had replaced parts on that car without performing simple power, ground, and circuit return checks. In my opinion, the only rationale for this, ladies and gentlemen, even for the guys that get 40 years in the business, is the race against the flat rate clock. Would you agree with me on that? Because no matter how good we are at diagnosing a car, when the chips are down and that customer's sitting in the waiting room and we got to get an answer, sometimes we have to go to the point of replacing parts and trying to see what's next. I understand that. I acknowledge that. I've done it. You've done it. It's part of our business. But in over 80% of those cases, the end fix was wiring a connector or a mechanical component, and it was solved with the use of a lab oscilloscope as the primary diagnostic tool. Another opinion I have about this is technicians today have to, and I put have to in quotes for a reason, spend way too much time looking stuff up. Would you agree with that, techs? It can be a real pain in the neck. I mean, you're doing 20 to 30 minutes of research before you can lay your hands on the car. Is it necessary? Yes. But is there a better way? Yes. And I'm going to share that with you today to the best of my ability. Many times, by the time that technician has gone to AllData and spent that 20 or 30 minutes looking up circuit descriptions and so forth, In our support business, we've already tested the car and have the failed part out in our hands. If I'm doing it online, it's not out in my hand, but we've identified the part by the time the tech gets back to the car. How are we doing this? We're doing it by simple physical testing on the circuit involved. You see, we can spend all kinds of time on all data, and we do need that information from time to time, but how many of you guys that have been in the business for a while would agree with me, sometimes jumping into that circuit and get some information for ourselves can help lead us to the problem well before we have to go to all data. Would you guys agree with that? Yeah. That's my message today, because in 80% of our first-time callers that call in do not have one or more of the needed diagnostic tools, scanners, platforms, or scopes necessary to work on these modern cars in their shop when they call me for help. In a lot of those cases, I have to tell the customer, I'm sorry, we can't go beyond this until you find someone in your town that can lend you a lab scope. Because in some cases, my support call is in Seattle, and I'm on the floor in my living room in Florida. So part of the wake-up call is, guys, we really have to key in on this, equipping our technicians with what they need to be successful at diagnostics. Because that's a huge point of technician frustration, and it's a huge point of our industry having a problem retaining, hiring, and bringing techs along in the industry. This is a real danger point. Okay? 85% of our total fixes of every call that come into our hotline are solved with a lab scope. Only 15% of our fixes are solved with a scan tool only, and that is usually a coding event or some simple, not simple, that's a bad word to use in this context, a piece of data in the scan tool that the technician misunderstood or missed. Does that make sense? In over 30% of our calls, the technician states that Identifix led him to replace the first part. Now look, I've been around this industry long enough to know that that's a hot button with shop owners, techs, and everybody in the industry, okay? Some people say, listen, before I say this word, let me acknowledge Identifix is a very valuable, awesome tool, but some shops allow it to be turned into IdentiCrutch. And that becomes very expensive for the shop owner and the customer whose vehicle you're working on. And as a consultant, and this is some of the reality slap, but I'm going to say it. This is almost Trump-like, so watch out. I did not. Oh no, that's the wrong president. As a consultant, trainer, and practicing support person, it literally blows my mind, folks, how many shops spend tens of thousands of dollars on front-end initiatives, sales training, process training, that kind of stuff. Again, very necessary to help us with our business, but it blows my mind how much money is spent on that when in the background that shop is a complete and utter disaster diagnostically. What the heck good does it do to count the beans if you can't produce the beans out the back door of that shop? Does that make sense? Some of these shops drop huge dollars on these initiatives, right? But I, as a technical consultant and an equipment supplier, worked for 3 years with this shop to put a simple $3,000 lab scope in the store, and I can't get that done. But yet, they'll spend $30,000 on ATI. Again, I know the ATI people. They're very awesome people, very good at what they do at helping you grow your business. But guys, there has to be a balance here in the industry. We have to balance the back end with the front end. Would you agree with that? We have to, because the technology is getting ready to leave us in the dust here. Okay? To me, this kind of paradigm is complete madness. Why? It's madness to me because take a look at our industry's biggest single issue right now: retention and hiring of technicians. The older, more experienced technicians are going away. Why? We're going to look at that on the next slide. We're having dire trouble, and I mean dire trouble. And when I showed you that map, it's all over the United States, not just here in the Northwest, but we're having dire trouble hiring new techs. Would you agree with that? I mean, you can't find them. We're also having problems with technology outpacing the equipment that's sitting in our shop right now, and we're also having a critical problem, even with the good old ATEX, with technology outpacing the technician's understanding. Some of the engineering things that are going into these cars are far, far beyond what I can comprehend. And believe me when I tell you, as an instructor, I need to be a student of my business, and I am. And I'm having trouble staying on top of this. I can't imagine what a 30-year-old tech's going through that hasn't had formal training on electronics. None of these issues with technicians, retention, hiring, and keeping the old guys working are going to be fixed unless we find that balance and we start to invest some of our initiatives into the back end of the business, the diagnostic end and the training end. And I know a lot of you guys are making great efforts at doing that. There's a lot of people here in front of me that I know that have invested heavily in equipment and training, but there's also a lot of people in this room that I know that haven't and that call for help quite often, more than they should. The back end of our shops, guys, is where all of the dollars that we bean count in the front come from. That's the reality that we have to come to today. Let's start focusing a little bit more on the back end to prevent fossils leaving business. FLB is a real problem for us right now, right? I can remember FLB first happened in my lifetime in the 1974 to 75 range when electronic ignition came out on the cars, and the techs would walk up to the car, the old gray-haired guys flip the hood and go, "What's that silver box there?" I'm not working on that. Time to retire. That's fossils leaving business. Why is this our industry's greater challenge? Because the older techs are now getting frustrated with the complexity of the diagnostic being put to them today versus the flat rate pay involved. Would you guys agree with that? No matter what their level of testing ability, this frustration exists. The guys in the middle years can burn out very quickly based on the same thing, because the guys in the middle years haven't got to the level that the A-techs are at. Does that make sense? In other words, they're still struggling to learn the diagnostic process, and then we've got quantum leaps of technology heaping in on us over here. Okay? We've been losing these people to municipalities, retail, real estate, and other fields like truck driving, where stress is less and pay is more. Now, I've been in many automotive seminars in the last 2 years where the discussion comes up on how we're paying people in this business. We have to start to rethink our model. There are some great young millennials entering the business, and when I say great, in my training business, I've embraced and had young millennials seriously embrace the diagnostic process. Why? Because they're already computer savvy, and they already got part of the equation down that we as older techs never had. We had to struggle our way through to learn. So some of these millennials, I think some of you in the room can agree, and you have one or two, are dynamic at jumping in there and learning how to fix these cars. But a large majority of millennials are millennials. No offense, dudes. But a lot of these guys seriously are flaming out early, quickly, because of the complexity of the work, the steep learning curve in front of them, and the lower level of pay for an entry-level tech. All those things, three things, are conspiring to make it difficult for us to hire and retain good technicians today. Excuse me. Technicians of all ages, and this is so important in this discussion, technicians of all ages are and continue to be pushed into diagnosing computer circuits prior to, well before, I should say, most even had a solid understanding of how electricity flows. I know for me, that was exactly how I came up in the business. And I also know for most of you it was true too. Because I would venture to say if 8% of the technicians went through formal technician schooling, that would be a lot. Would you agree with that? Which means 95 probably plus % of us learned the same way I learned and you learned, which is trial by fire to get that car fixed. Okay? Now, technicians who learn this way, which is most of us, have developed varying degrees of ability for diagnosing these cars, but the technology keeps on trucking in quantum leaps. Our diagnostic success or frustration in all cases comes down to this learning curve and where we personally are as technicians. In the learning curve, in our abilities, and how we're going at these cars right now. But there's also a frustration level for all techs in the flat rate system, and I don't care if you pay hourly or not. Every tech is still designed to produce. And if you're paying hourly, you're probably paying a flat rate bonus or something to incentivize the tech. So flat rate is flat rate. We're under pressure to get these cars out. Today, when we see multiple parts replacements going on in a car, long extended diagnostic times, 4 or 5 days, it's the result of a number of factors going on in our industry. First, what we just discussed on the last slide, which is where that tech is personally in his journey to become a good diagnostician, right? And these results are different for each shop. So there is no seminar, there is no piece of equipment, there is no guy that's going to come in front of a group like you and solve this technician problem. It's up to us. Totally up to us. So it's where the technician is. It's what our shop's current diagnostic processes and habits are. What I find as a support guy is the habits are terrible in some of these shops. There is no program. We're just shotgun diagnosing the cars. What equipment we have available to us to work on these cars is a major factor in your technician's ability to get to the answer of that problem and the frustration therein, and what resources we have available. I got guys that are still working on a 5-year-old shop key, no ALLDATA, no Mitchells, no Identifix. And they're still working with a scanner that's 5 years old that the owner of the shop hasn't updated for 3 years. Now, I know that's not the case with most of you guys. You guys in this room are high performers, but I'm pointing out an industry problem. Everybody's talking about it, but nobody's doing the hard work of bringing it to a head and saying, how do we fix it, guys? So, physically testing, if we want to simplify our diagnostics, from the guy in the business from 40 years to the entry-level guy, simplify your diagnostics. Start to use physical testing instead of making guesses off that scan tool and ALLDATA. Test the circuits, right? If we use physical testing, using mechanical and signal overlay devices, we're actually simplifying every single vehicle we work on, even a 2017 Mercedes. You can take this same battery of tests from a Kia to a Benz to a Chevy, and you now have one test you need to interpret and understand, and you can move it from one car to the next to the next. That cuts out all the circuit complexity, all the computers, and everything in your diagnostics, if you approach with physical testing. Reading the results of physical testing, doing it the way I'm describing, which is one test for fuel injection, one test for no start, one test for ABS using physical testing, allows the tech to learn how to read these signals accurately on all makes and models. I got guys that waste all kinds of time looking for good and bad components. It's necessary sometimes, but most of the time it isn't. Not only does this method simplify fixing the vehicle, guys, but it cuts hours out of the diagnostic on a tough one. Remember, 80% of our cars go fine, 20% don't. 5% are an absolute nightmare. In my support business, I get the 5%, which is why I have license to speak about this. One of the tests that I've been showing and teaching this weekend is in cylinder waveform and putting the PCM signals over it so we can see how everything's working in time with the pistons moving up and down. Guys, that is so critical on a no starter or drivability. Why aren't we doing it? This is a way to go from a Mercedes to a Kia to a Chevy to a Lexus and look at the same test every time and get results. Now, here's my call to action. Begin to focus all of our people on developing their physical testing skills, even the guys that know everything, that have been in the business for 40 years. Because I can stand up here and tell you that I can operate diagnostically on a fairly high level, but the day that I think I know everything and carry myself as such attitude-wise, what am I doing? I've lost it. That's the end of my career. If we think we're such good techs that we don't get stuck on cars, think again. We have to be humble enough to realize that somebody somewhere, even a young millennial, can always teach us something about the operation of that car that we didn't know. We must go back to basic electrical testing skills. Voltage drop, testing with oscilloscopes. Put your hands on that car and test the components before you replace them. We've got to involve everyone, from the most experienced A-tech in the shop all the way down to the guy that sweeps the floor. Why? Because this is how we identify our diamonds in the rough. And this is how we start to take the load off of us for finding, retaining, and training new techs. And I'm going to just speak real quick to this, because I got a lot to cover, so I'm going to go fast. But I had a client on the East Coast that has a number of shops, a multiple store group, and when I was setting up training with him, he looked at me, leaned back in his chair, and kind of went, so I need to get my A-techs all rotated into this class, huh? And I said, dude, you need to get all of your techs rotated into this class. Hold on. Okay, oh, I see it. What the heck is going on with this thing? Is it good? Okay, we're good. Scope it. So, we need to build a culture of learning in that shop. My Goodyear group said, I only need to get my ATEX there. I said, what about your tire slingers? How do you know that you don't put that tire slinger or that suspension guy into one of my classes and we light his fire and we get his interest going on diagnostics, and all of a sudden he picks up a scan tool, and lo and behold, in 6 months he becomes dynamic at diagnosis because somehow he was born with the ability to understand it, and we've considered him a tire slinger, and he's still in the corner shooting tires after 4 years. We're not including him in training, he just puts tires in the car for us. That, to me, is the most critical mistake most shop owners make when they're looking at investing in training for their shop. Train them all, guys. That's how we find the diamonds in the rough. Even the most advanced technician needs to study basic electronics and electrical training. We have to. We've got to go back there. This is how we fix our industry's technician problem, promote our existing techs' progress, hire new techs, and more importantly, incentivize new hires to come to work for us. A program of support and training and having the right equipment in the shop so we don't have these normal technician frustrations. So let's talk about the training a little bit. Getting the cart before the horse. Seek to bring some level of training to all of your staff. This is the biggest thing missed by most shop owners when I talk to them about investing in training for their group. If we involve all of our people, we will in fact find the diamonds in the rough, sometimes right in our own organization, right here and right now, tomorrow. If we do not, this industry will continue to struggle to develop good techs, and the old guys like me are going to retire. We're going to go bye-bye. So we better start bringing up some good guys behind us. You would be amazed at how many people in my training business we have gotten to light up into diagnostics and take ownership of it and get better at it on the C and D tech level just because we included them in a diagnostic training class that the shop owner thought, this guy's not qualified, I'm not going to spend the $200 to put him in the class. That is a real mistake. And the other thing that bothers me a little bit about today's training industry is that you get these seminars, the times they are a-changing. Now I understand we need to learn about new product and everything, right? But you're getting CAN bus classes, optical systems, telematics, GDI, right? Software updating, all of it. Virtual sensing, we're getting, radar cruise control. We've got people all over this country teaching these overview courses of the new technology. Is it important for us to know? Yes. But here's my question. What's really missing? What is really missing? Well, in my mind, what's really missing is how do we as technicians apply the knowledge that we take from these overview courses and put our hands on the car the next morning in the bay and fix it? That's the question. How we do it is we learn physical testing procedures. We study theory-based training. Okay? We apply a diagnostic process and we hold our people accountable to it. And we make physical basic testing the root paradigm of our shop's growth. Because remember, we're talking about back end, not counting ROs. There's many models and many systems in cars today, guys. So the reason that I say theory-based training is that if I can teach somebody how a collision avoidance system works on all cars, or a fuel injection system works, or a GDI or a lighting system works, they can then take that knowledge and go from that Kia to the Benz to the Lexus and have a good general understanding of how that circuit operates before they have to get into the complexities of how that particular car line operates. Does that make sense? But yet we've got people putting people in these advanced classes and they still don't know how to voltage drop a circuit. To me, this is a big, big problem. And I'm speaking to the guys that have been in the business 40 years and the guys that are just starting. And the reason is, remember, I told you, everybody has their own learning curve in life. So the guy that's been in the business 40 years does not necessarily know how to properly voltage drop a circuit. He might talk like he can, but you put a meter in his hand and sometimes they'll stumble. Some of the other guys will surprise you and just are wizards, okay? Theory-based, first we must understand how that system operates, then we can approach any vehicle confidently. Now the only difference in what we're looking at is what the OEM calls different components, the wiring schematics, and the distinctions car for car. Does that make sense, guys? But if I know the theory of how it works, I can approach with confidence every single time. In my book, technicians in this room and shop owners in this room must start to seek out theory-based classes. Are the system specifics important? Very much so. But start with a basis of theory. Because here I've got GDI up on the screen, right? And I can take that to any car line you see around that circle, and then I can put the guy into a theory-based class on variable valve timing systems. And now he can work on cam phasing problems on any car that rolls in the door without having to spend an hour on all data figuring out how it works. I can also then send them to any number of other classes, communications, anything I need, right? And we're going to have success. Now, what about the technology? We've talked about the techs and the training, equipment. It's often done by consensus. I want to address this head on. Shop owners will usually buy equipment by consensus, meaning if all my techs don't agree, I don't want the equipment. Why? Because you know and I know if all the techs don't agree and there's pushback, you're going to make a $5,000, $3,000, $10,000 investment, and it's going to sit on a shelf and do what? Collect dust. But diagnostic equipment is often purchased, and believe me, I can speak to experience with this because, as you know, I carry equipment and I deal with shop owners all the time. It's often shopped by price rather than by function. Technicians, and I'm one, when consulted on a new piece of technology or a new methodology, will do one of two very, very predictable things. First, they'll embrace a new technology and go after it and seek to learn it. Those are the kind of techs we really love. Second, the other predictable thing, they'll push back on that thing due to their comfort zone, due to the fact that they don't want to change, or due to the fact that they're a short timer with 2 years to retirement, and this guy's like, I'm not learning a lab scope. What, are you kidding me? Well, he's the oldest guy in the shop. He's been working for that shop owner for 20 years, so what does he say to the shop owner? Nah, we've been doing fine, boss. We don't need that scope. And guess what? The third year I'm in front of that shop owner, they still don't have a scope. So this is a major problem. The dangers for the shop owner in this is if you do it by consensus and you let the older techs that don't really, some of the guys that don't want to embrace new technology make that decision for you, you are going to have trouble building your bench for the future, period. Because you're not equipped to keep the techs out of frustration. One of the biggest shop owners' concerns that I have is that it's going to sit on the shelf and collect dust. Second most common, training. You got a Snap-on or something like that, they come in, they sell it to you, they do a buttonology class, and they leave. Have fun, figure that out by yourself. It's a major concern for a shop owner that's getting ready to spend $10,000 on a diagnostic upgrade. Believe me, it's the second thing that comes out of their mouth every time after the dust comment, right? So what does the shop owner say? Well, for now, we're going to just stick with what we got. But then you're going to get the results that you get. Right? So I'm not going to waste any time on this because I got a few more slides, but you need some basics to be working on today's high-tech cars, specifically the 2012s and up. You need a lab scope. You need a generic, good bidirectional scanner. Generic, meaning I can work on everything. J2534 programmer now becomes your factory tool as of 2018. We got to have that. Okay, the leak detector or smoke machine, very important, as well as a borescope. In my GDI class, for those of you who are sitting at it, a borescope is now one of my favorite diagnostic tools because I can see air conditioning motors down the AC vent without taking the dash off. I can look down turbos. I can look down the gullet of a GDI and see if it's got the carbon. Borescope is a thumbs-up tool for diagnosis today. So I'm going to blow through these slides real quick. This is the paradigm we're seeing in the business. Vehicle comes in for a check engine light, tech sells a fuel pump. Once the pump was installed, the check engine light remained, so another pump was installed. Light's still on. Tech, using a flow chart and a scan tool, diags it as a pressure sensor at the top of the tank. So they replaced the pressure sensor after waiting 3 days for the part. The light's still on. Must be the PCM, right? Shop owner says, you better call Gary before you replace that PCM. When somebody says to a shop owner it needs a PCM, hold on, right? Because there's probably a bunch of them in the corner on the floor. So we logged in with this tech and we figured out that both the signal return line and the 5-volt reference line had 0 volts. did a simple voltage drop test back to the computer, and had a bad connection under the seat. Repaired it and tested it. Fixed. Now, here's the thing I want to get at. What lessons did we learn? Did we have some pain in that car? What was the financial cost to the customer, the shop, the parts store? Here's the way it broke down. 2 $800 fuel pump assemblies. The customer paid for one. The parts store paid for the other. The Napas and the World Packs and everyone else selling parts in this room, your ears are going to perk up now. It's called returns. Okay? After the parts store ate one on their balance sheet, they went after the supplier to pay for that second one. Was it really defective? No, so everybody loses. The pressure sensor was replaced by the customer at a cost of $93, 10 hours of labor time, 2 tank removals and so forth, a lot of time and head scratching, and it was a wire connector. This is the wake-up call I'm trying to give the industry right now. In this group of stores that I was visiting on the East Coast, there were 9 such instances of this that I observed that week while I was there. Think about it. What's the bottom line? $2,800. Okay? The customer paid $1,400 for technician school, and the parts store paid $650. The shop owner paid $750 in downtime of production. And the tech and the shop owner lost over 8 hours of productive time that shouldn't have happened. Why? Because we didn't start with physical testing. This repair should have easily been done for $200 or $300. The total cost when you add up all the disasters, $2,800. And there was 9 of them in 1 week. Do we have an industry problem here, guys? I think we do. And we extrapolate the problem, it's big, because if you go into one group with 9 of those instances in 1 week, start doing the math across the country, and it's mind-blowing what we're asking our customers to pay for. Why is this important? Profits, productivity, local reputation, and the sanity of the shop owner and the tech. So our big issues, our technicians leaving the business. My call to action is this, 2 more slides. Promote theory-based learning. Equip the shop with at least what you need to succeed. Promote a culture of total physical testing in the shop. Simplify what you're doing. Develop a diagnostic chain of command and interrupt that technician at a half an hour. Okay? Ask the shop foreman or your better tech to conduct basic physical testing classes once a week for your shop. And learn how to use these patternized tests I described to become accurate and productive in your diagnostics. It truly works. Okay, now, don't be afraid to try new ideas. If you need to figure out a way to pay for your diagnostic equipment, put a diagnostic menu like that in place. Charge properly for your diagnostics. Select what service you're doing for the customer and charge accordingly. Okay? We got some exciting times in this business. In closing, guys, Automotive News has just reported that independent shops can expect a full 18 to 30% explosion in car count at the independent shops simply because of the massive surge between 2012 and 2016 in new vehicle sales. You see, we had cash for clunkers and a market crash in 2008. So we've just spent the last 6 years realigning our business to low car count. It's time to get ready for some big car count, because they're saying there's going to be over 35 million additional vehicles coming into the automotive aftermarket in the next 18 to 24 months. Let's get ready for this, and let's get your techs ready for diagnostic success. Focus on that physical testing, embrace regular training, and have a hunger to learn and promote self-study in your shops. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today. I love you guys. God bless America. And Canada, too.